You see this often in municipal elections where there's a saying that says potholes don't have politics. And because local government is trying to solve problems.
Margaret, thank you for coming. You're the best.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm so pumped we finally get to meet because you and I have been conversing for months on Facebook talking about election stuff. And here we are, like it's coming down to it. We have the runoff. It's a lot. It's a lot. But you've been covering Boise elections for some time, right?
Yeah, I've been covering politics in Ada County for 5 years. Most of that been focused on Boise, but in the last couple of years, I've done Ada County, I've done ACHD elections, and I've done Eagle politics as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So here we are. We have Brad. We have Jason, obviously president of the city council, and then the mayor. Good times. Everybody knows that. I really wanted to have you come on. Neither of us live in Eagle. Right. And we're both actively working to try to present the best information to people in the area. Right. So I wanted to have you come on first and foremost to help address some of just the nonsense and misinformation out there. And again, neither of us live in Eagle. We're not voting in this. Neither of us have a dog in the fight. So I thought you would be a great co-host for this episode.
Well, thanks for having me. I love talking politics and I love getting good information out there.
Great. Okay. Well, let's just start off then. So first off with the defamation, or not just defamation, but misinformation stuff. All right. Why don't we start with, let's start with Pike is not a Democrat. You want to start with this one?
That sounds like a good place to start. Really, you see this often in municipal elections where there's a saying that says potholes don't have politics. And because local government is trying to solve problems. And so often you see this where sometimes people in the same party will run against each other. And so Pike is a Republican. He's been a Republican for a long time. He's been accused of not being and being a Democrat. And that comes from him having bipartisan support. And just because someone has bipartisan support, there are Democrats backing him. He has gotten support from the conservation voters for Idaho, but that doesn't mean that he has not been a card-carrying Republican for decades.
Right. And one of I heard Robert Kennedy's podcast on Rogan a few months back. Really, really awesome podcast. But it used to be that if you had somebody who had a position that appealed to both sides of the aisle, that person was like a champion of the people. It's like, what he's saying makes sense to Republicans. What he's saying makes sense to Democrats. And it now appears to be like a liability. If you're not so hardcore Republican that no Democrat can stomach you, then that's like a notch against you.
That's true. And I think that it plays out on both sides too. There are Democrats who will say, oh, I don't want to support this person because this person is backed by Republicans. And it's because our country has just become really politically divided and splintered into these separate camps that can't quite see eye to eye. But what disrupts that is that in municipal government, you still got to get the trash taken out. You still have to plow the roads when there's snow outside. You still have to make sure there's parks and there's walking trails and people are safe and have the police come to their house, all of these things. And that's why it creates this interesting dynamic where it doesn't quite fit into these partisan boxes. And that's really what we're seeing in this election is two Republicans who've been active in local government for a really long time. Jason Pierce has been around the city of Eagle for many years. Pike was in local government here and in California. These are people that are in the same party. They have different views on local government because local government isn't necessarily always gonna cut that way.
Right. And again, there are Democrats in Eagle, and the Democrats have to, if they are going to a vote, they have to vote between two Republicans, and they want the Republican, they want the mayor that they feel will hit the issues that are important to them. I want the trash taken out, right? And there's a big thing about Hardin versus Republican, whatever, it doesn't matter. But there's they want trash service, they want police service, they want clean parks, they want, the budget to go to the right thing. So it is really unfortunate that it has become this, if anyone that's a Democrat supports you, you must be a terrible person, when it used to be that was a great thing. But again, to be clear, Pike is a Republican. He has been for a very long time. There are definitely, I don't know if it's mailers or door knockers or people, but I've heard that people are getting very concerned because they're like, well, I don't know, because Pike is like a Democrat. It's like, no, he's not a Democrat. Just full stop.
Well, and especially now, calling someone a Democrat is like the ultimate insult. Especially in a conservative community like Eagle, but just because, it can often be used as a way to just insult someone you don't agree with.
Right.
People will call Brad Little a Democrat because they don't like him, or a rhino. But that doesn't necessarily, like, just because you don't agree with him or he's not as conservative as you, doesn't necessarily mean he hasn't been a card carrying member of the quote unquote big tent Republican Party for years and years. And so kind of just plays out it's just playing out that dynamic here in this race.
Right. One thing that I really appreciate before we move on to the next thing is that that everyone's so hot to call their opponent like a Democrat or a liberal or a socialist, that issues that have classically been championed by conservative politicians, like more police officers, have become this Democratic spin of like, he wants to blow up the budget, he wants to work, he's in the pocket of the unions, like all of these things. It's like, guys, the crazy people in California were defunding the police. He's literally doing the opposite, or at least attempting to, and again, let's be really clear. And Mayor Pierce is not looking to destroy the Eagle Police Department or like defund the police. He has some disagreements with the sheriff and the county commissioners about the nature of Title 31. That's fine. Like, people are allowed to have disagreements. He's not looking to destroy it. And we'll get into the law enforcement aspect later. But anyway, let's go to the next one. So if Pike is elected, and this was a point you brought up before we went live, if Pike is elected, he will still have to work with the city council. Like, Pike doesn't just get to do whatever he wants if he's elected.
That's right. I mean, it's almost like having a president and then having a Congress of the opposite party.
Right.
You have to, as a mayor, he has to get those votes to pass his budget, to do the things he wants to do, like ending the lawsuit against the Eagle Senior Center, or reestablishing the Arts Commission, all of these sorts of things that he's wanted to do. If the city council says no, he's dead in the water. And this city council, they are not happy with him. Everyone on there has endorsed Pierce. The two incoming council people ran on a ticket with Mayor Pierce. And so Pike would have to come in from he'd be the mayor, but he's from this position of having to try to convince these leaders who have just spent months arguing with his supporters on Facebook and campaigning against him.
Okay. Talk to me about this, because again, another question I had for you is like, is it typical for sitting city council people to actively campaign against another council member, or in this case, the council president?
So we saw this similar dynamic play out in Boise 4 years ago, because we had an incumbent, Mayor Dave Beater, a Democrat, and his city council president, Democrat Lauren McLean, run against him. And it created a really nasty divide in the city, in the Democratic Party, particularly in Boise. And all of the sitting city council members, except one, endorsed the mayor. And the one who didn't endorse the sitting mayor at the time didn't say anything at all. And so at one point during the runoff, multiple sitting city council members and ex-Boise city council members, they had a press conference. It was very cold, in front of the Idaho State Capitol. And they did this big press conference, and they said, this is why we think Mayor Dave Beater should get another term and not Mayor Lauren McLean. And they were out there publicly endorsing him over her. And so but then Lauren McLean won. A lot of those people endorsed her when she ran for a second term. So we've seen this play out before, and it's because city council, it works hand in hand with the mayor. They have a vested interest in having their political ally be the mayor so they can get things done, and they can influence policy in the way that they want to. And so I think there's some people that are really aghast by this, and I understand being frustrated by intergovernmental tension, but it's not necessarily out of the norm for people to do this.
Gotcha. So, because again, I hadn't seen something like this play out before, and I was covering elections back in California. And then when I saw like Charlie Bond going on next door, and then, obviously you have more people popping up on Facebook and stuff, I was like, God, this is kind of wild. But it's good to know that it's not totally atypical. It's something that happens on occasion.
Right. But I will say the amount of campaigning and the way that they have done it was really interesting to me. I mean, I was seeing Charlie Bond's or Councilmember Bond's posts on Nextdoor. He was writing long posts, multiple long
He had
posts.
5 editions of the first one. He was like, I will release these 5 days, but like one day apart. I was like, oh my gosh. And each of the posts was like pages. Brian Allman did a piece on one of them, I think. But
Right.
it was like, wow. You know what struck me? It's just the way people have been reduced to communicating is so weird. I don't know if reduced is the right word, but like the fact that you would go to Nextdoor for like a press release style thing. It's like, it's Nextdoor. It's supposed to be people finding dog sitters and selling like old couches, but it's become any platform where people have the capacity to write things down has become a platform for political speech.
Yeah, and we could talk about this for hours, do a whole other podcast on this, but Nextdoor is so underappreciated as a political site. And because
Councilman Bond found it.
yeah, he's rocking it up there, right?
Yeah.
But Nextdoor is a place where so many people now are going for their information about specifically local governments, and it creates this almost like battleground in the comments, and then moderators are closing comments, and who's the moderator? Maybe they're supporting a certain candidate.
Right.
And so seeing all of that flame out on Nextdoor and in, Facebook groups, this has been just such a social media heavy election. Every time I get on social media, I see 10 posts of everyone fighting about this election almost every single day. So it's really interesting. The other thing that happened is the 3 city council members, other than Pike, they put out a joint press release at one point making a statement. I if I recall right, it was about the Eagle Police contract.
Yeah.
And that sparked questions for Pike of, was this an open meeting violation?
Right. I remember that. He's like, you're not supposed to meet, all 3 of you, and you put out like a joint press release. When did you meet? You're not all supposed to be in the same room together, hanging out, talking about stuff, especially let alone something that's being negotiated.
And that's such I think, a preview of some of the things that could happen if Pike is elected, because you're going to have 4 city council members who they likely will be ideologically opposed to the mayor, and they're trying to govern around him. Well, how do you govern around the mayor? You talk to each other. And to be absolutely clear, I'm not accusing anyone here of having an open meeting violation. I'm just talking about like,
or saying that they absolutely will.
Right. That is not my intent in saying this, but I think it would not surprise me if in the future, if these council members, they're trying to pass things that they want or block Pike's agenda because they don't agree with him, that could be a tool, and we're going to see more accusations of these open meeting laws and more tension around that issue. And so that's kind of just a preview. That's something I see as someone who, like, a local government nerd is going, oh my gosh, we're like, this could be the next battleground, is the open meeting law. Well, how did you guys all come to this conclusion without being in a meeting? And so I think that we're going to see a lot of tension if Pike is elected. And anyone that is on Facebook saying, yay, I don't like Mayor Pierce, and if he loses, all the things that he's done will go away, you're kidding yourself, because one, local government, the wheels churn slowly, and there's all these things, but then also council is on Pierce's side, and they have a really, really, really sour relationship with Pike at this point.
Right. Now, one of the beautiful things about the way the government is structured is that it's designed to have some degree of tension, right? So when you say, hey, there's going to be tension between the council and the mayor, I don't even necessarily know that that's a bad thing, right? Like if you have, everybody likes things to function well and function easily, but sometimes you have to have that tension. You have to have that battle of ideas and one of them winning the day to get the best possible option, right? To get the best possible outcome, which is like, well, I didn't like that's the nature of politics, right? Like you have tension, you don't agree, you vote it down, you're just like there, you have this arguing, and then it's like, okay, you don't like this piece, let's throw that piece out. And I'm like, all right, well, like I don't like that piece, so you got to get rid of that. They're like, oh, fine, I'll throw that out. And then like you have people coming to the table where they make this compromise, and that's generally, a distillation of the most important things from both of their sides, which gives the best things from both of the sides. So it might be tough, it might be harder, right? It might be more tension filled, but that doesn't mean it's going to produce a worse result for the people of Eagle. And that's not to say that it's the right call, right? Like, I'm not advocating for Councilman Pike to get put in. What I'm saying is, when you say tension, it's like, let him work. Let him work for it. Like,
yeah, we'll see. I think that there's always going to be that push and pull of debating ideas, but if things get locked up, I mean, the local governments, they have a statutory requirement to pass a budget every year and to do these things. And so we'll see kind of how the city works and what projects they can get done.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm hopeful. Next one. Mayor Pierce did not single-handedly get on some flying, what's a flying horse?
A flying carpet?
Pegasus? Is Pegasus, right?
Oh, yeah.
He did not single-handedly get on like a white Pegasus with like a shield and a sword and like carve out Avimor and like lift it up and dump it into Eagle. Like, he did not, like, yes, he recommended for Eagle, but the city council are the ones that voted for Avimor to be annexed into Eagle.
That's right. But it's also important to point out that Pierce was voted in being very clear. He was supported by Avimor. He got a lot of financial support from the developer 4 years ago. He has never been shy about, hey, I think it's advantageous to Eagle to annex this thing in. And so that was something that voters went to the ballot box 4 years ago knowing and voting for him, especially when Stan Ridgway, who was mayor at the time, who was running against Pierce, was staunchly trying to end the Avimor annexation. And so there's this idea, like, I think some people have this idea of like, oh, Pierce sort of, he did this without anyone knowing, and it was this kind of dark horse situation. I don't think that's true. Like, Pierce has openly talked about, I think this is advantageous for Eagle to do because then we have a say in what Avimor is developed like.
Right.
And I think it's a good idea. And he made his case, and voters 4 years ago, over 40% turned out to say, yeah, I think Pierce is the better choice.
Right. We didn't have a runoff 4 years ago, right?
No.
So he got 50 plus 1.
Yes,
right?
he
Like,
did.
Yeah. So the voters, oh, you were saying of the Eagle population, of voting population, over 40% came out and they voted him in.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And to put this in perspective for a municipal election, that's high turnout. That is good turnout. And so, because usually these elections are much smaller than a presidential election where, everyone and their mother goes and votes. And so if you see that number clear 40 and someone, and he won, it's like, okay, this was not something that kind of slipped past, notice. If you were an Eagle 4 years ago during that election, you knew what the stakes were. Right. Either you wanted Avimor or you didn't.
Right. If I may ask, and this would be conjecture, what do you think changed? Because obviously when the Avimor, public hearings came up, it was like hundreds of people said no. And so do you think that it was that people didn't recognize how big of a piece of Jason's kind of time would be dedicated to Avimor? Or like, what do you think it was?
I think there's a couple things that changed. I think first, Eagle has had a lot of new people move in the last 4 years. You got to remember, this is a different city than it was 4 years ago because of new people coming in. And those new people, a lot of them were coming from places like California, and they didn't want growth, and they didn't want this sprawl. They didn't want things going on. And so they came in, they didn't get a chance to vote in 2019. And they're saying, oh, darn, this is not what I want. And so I think there's that attitude. There's also the attitude of there was criticisms of Ridgway when he was mayor. And there were other factors that people wanted to do. Like, a lot of people talk about the Eagle Water Company. I talked to a lot of people at the time. They supported Pierce because he said, yeah, I want to purchase the Eagle Water Company so Veolia doesn't buy it, and we can have this as a part of the city water system. He later walked back on that promise after he got elected because he said, he decided it was actually better for taxpayers to not purchase it. I can't remember his exact language. But so I remember talking to people 4 years ago, and the Avimor issue was there, but it was also, there were other factors. There were other things that they liked about Pierce. And then the Avimor thing was on the table, but maybe they were more worried about the Eagle Water issue at the time.
Right. Which didn't play out the way it was supposed to anyway. So perhaps people are upset about that as well. Who knows?
Yeah, and there's always tension in local government. There's always, things are changing. Growth is hard. It, people sometimes they might vote for someone and then not quite realize the implications of or how their things would change.
Right. Or they were voting as a no vote for someone else. So they're like,
correct.
Maybe he was being plain as day, but I just didn't want Ridgeway or something like that.
Exactly. So there's all kinds of different dynamics for why people would do that.
Gotcha. Another one. Both people will have, both Mayor Pierce and Councilman Pike will absolutely have to allow growth, right? The idea that one of them is going to put like a cork in it or something, like that's just not going to happen, because bottom line is you have private property rights. You have people that want to develop pieces of land. They can talk about developing it or meeting requirements or different types of zoning. Neither one of them has this magic wand that's going to stop development.
That's absolutely true. And the Idaho Local Land Use Planning Act governs all of these things, and it gives people rights. If you own land, you can build on it. The government can't just say no. They can say what it looks like. Like, I think it should be houses on 1 acre lots, but they can't actually stop it. And so sometimes I think candidates and the people who vote for them get a little starry-eyed over the idea of, this is the one. This is the candidate that will stop all the growth in my neighborhood that I don't like. And so that's another important thing, to temper expectations around Brad Pike. If he were to win, we're still going to see new subdivisions over by Highway 16.
Right.
We're still going to see new people come to Eagle. We're still going to see all of this change, but it's just going to be a little bit of a different thing of what he wants to do. But there is no policy. You can't build a wall around Eagle and say, right, we're done. You can't come in.
We're done. Build the wall. Who knew? Who knew that was going to come back today? Okay.
Right. Wild card. You never know what will happen.
Okay. Awesome. Next one. You've never been to Hollister, California, right?
No, never.
I've never been to Hollister, California, but I did watch a city council meeting the other day, and I have spoken with people that did not speak there. Everyone that I know that lives here who's talked about Brad, Councilman Pike, and his time in Hollister overwhelmingly favors him. He was a lone Republican in the city government, right? The city council. He's the only Republican. There's a lot is being made out of a sales tax that was voted on by the voters. Hollister was in dire straits because they had a building moratorium. There were all these kinds of things. And there has been a lot of analogy and kind of essentially saying, like, if you like the way California is going, Councilman Pike is part of that. One thing that somebody said at the city council meeting the other day was like, look, Hollister was screwed up well before Brad Pike showed up, and it's more screwed up now. But Hollister was better for Brad Pike's time as mayor. He was only mayor for 1 year, and then on the city council. So it's one of those things where, like, again, you've never been there. I've never been there. I'm not saying I know, but I'm saying that everybody who has been there or has lived there, multi-generation, business owner, the whole thing, they have spoken very positively about this. Would you agree?
I've heard that. I've also, seen rumblings on social media. Well, I heard from someone else that's negative. And I always want to tell people, it's in the eye of the beholder. Think about, again, I'm going to bring up Boise. You go to Boise, you talk to people on the street. Some of them will tell you Lauren McLennan is an amazing mayor. She, has built.
It's amazing.
She's amazing. She's built all this affordable housing. She's acting on climate change. She's doing, she's supporting LGBTQ people. This is something that's important to me. I love living in Boise. You're going to talk to other people who voted for Mike Masterson, and they're going to tell you a completely different story. They're going to tell you that Boise is terrible and that Lauren McLean has been an awful mayor and she can't manage anything and the police is just crazy. And both of those people live in the same city. And so I think it's really important when we're sort of arguing about, like, well, what was Pike's performance and time in Hollister, California? You got to remember, everyone's going to perceive things differently. It's going to be based on their political beliefs,
what their priorities were,
all of those things. And so that's why I personally have not dug into a lot of that stuff, because every single person who lives in a city has a different experience.
Right.
And it's important to remember, like, it's not easily
It's not objective.
sum
It's not
things
like
up
you got a grade. It's like Brad Pike got an A- as mayor,
as being
or like
mayor.
C- as mayor. Like, you don't know, because it depends on what your priorities were at the time and what you were hoping for from him. You know what? I gotta say, a small digression. I love LOVE when city governments make broad sweeping acts to like fight climate change or like address these it's like, okay, I'm not even saying you can't fight climate change. Like, however you want to do it, you want to, reduce electricity consumption or get electricity from other places. But I went to school in Berkeley. I don't care for Berkeley at all. I liked the education. I was very thankful to go there. I don't care for the city at all. But the city of Berkeley has been making these like nuclear declarations about how, like, what you can transport on the train tracks that go through Berkeley, and the Berkeley Rent Board has actually been making these declarations about like what Amtrak can transport like on the train tracks. And it was like, what are you doing? Like, how are you actually... India is like burning, like we have China, and like you're here like, yes, I fought it. Like, I'm happy you fought it. Like, good for you. Like, if that's your thing, good for you.
Well, yeah, and I think that just speaks to the fact that some people, like, everyone's going to have different priorities, and they're going to perceive these things differently. And, to be clear, I'm not endorsing any candidate. I'm not endorsing anything the city of Boise does.
Right. And I'm trying not to trash on the idea that like we should be good stewards of the environment. Like, I believe in preserving rivers and hunting grounds and like conserving things, right? Like, let's not, just have garbage everywhere. I'm sure plenty of people on Nextdoor can tell you about like the garbage in the BLM land and, burning stuff. And like, that's bad, right? But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think it's just important to like cap this off with, we can sit here and argue all day about how well Brad Pike might have run Hollister, California, but unless you're there and like really, really digging into some of this stuff, it's hard to accurately, objectively say whether it's good or bad, because we can look at our own city. Some people say Mayor Jason Pierce is the greatest mayor, and other people will say he was horrible. And it's important to remember that every single person is going to see this stuff differently, and then they're going to vote based on what matters to them.
Right. Last one, before we go on to other big issues. Councilman Pike has not missed debates or forums. It has appeared that there have been forums, and they have set up like 2 podiums, and like, Brad Pike's little card there. And then all these shots are going around about like, where is he? He's absent. Where the whole time Pike has been telling people, I will not be attending this. I am not doing another debate. I'm not coming to a forum. You will not see me there. Don't expect me to be there. And then the narrative goes out after these events that it's like, oh, he was absent. Like he no-showed. But you told me this is actually not an uncommon thing for somebody who perceives themselves to be ahead in an election to just stop talking. Stop attending formal things like debates and events on a regular basis.
Yeah, we again talk about the Boise mayor runoff 4 years ago. We saw this where Lauren McLean was ahead after the general election, and going into the runoff, she said, I'm going to do one debate. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it once. I'm not doing it anymore. And former Mayor Dave Beater really wanted to debate her. He really wanted more chances, right, to make his case. And McLean said, no, we're doing this once. And it was from that position of, well, I'm in a position of strength. I'm ahead. I'm just going to talk to voters and do what I want to do. And I think Pike is in that similar spot. He was posting on Facebook. He's like, if you want to see me debate Jason Pierce, watch the city council meetings. Right. You can see me making my point. I mean, Pierce and Pike were literally yelling at each other on the dais 2 meetings in a row over the Eagle contract for the police department and the budget. They have had, they disagreed on whether the mayor should get a pay raise. All of these sorts of things, and they have kind of positioned themselves. And so Pike has said, I'm gonna talk to voters. I think he's in a strong position going into this runoff, because the supermajority voted for anybody but Mayor Pierce.
Right.
And so why, he's in this position where I can just go talk to people how I want to talk to them.
Right.
And also, I've seen this tactic where groups will, in multiple elections now, feels like almost every year someone does this, where an interest group that maybe has already backed a candidate will have a forum, and then the other candidate won't show up, and they'll leave a placard for them. See the empty spot.
What happened?
So
my gosh.
or even just to get the photo,
Right.
photo op.
I saw one of those. I saw one of those today. It was like right from the angle, and Mayor Pierce is there smiling, and then the
with the
podium.
empty, yeah. And that's not to say that, like, I understand that voters are frustrated by it, or that I'm saying it's a good thing to do or whatever. Like, but you see this kind of play out in local elections. It's one of the major plot points. It seems to happen,
Right.
over and over, is people say, no, I don't think I want to go to that, and then we've got this debating an empty chair.
Right. Man, the more I learn about these as the years go on, and the more, like little, common political tactics and things that people employ, the more I realize I'm going to be like a 75-year-old dude, like, oh, they did that in 2023. Oh, that's nothing new. Like, oh, I've seen this a million times. Like, I hope I'm that guy. It's just kind of like accumulated wisdom. Like, don't worry, you'll get past this. Anyway, okay, so that's pretty much it for our kind of clearing the air with facts. Okay,
Right.
Then there are real considerations that these two candidates had different positions on. Let's start with the senior center. Okay,
Right.
so the senior center, big snafu, right? And I just spoke with Mayor Pierce and Councilman Pike again this weekend. Those episodes did get dropped on Monday. And okay, so bottom line is the senior organization was evicted from the senior building. And after that, there was a lawsuit filed to recoup some funds that were given to the senior organization. The city filed lawsuit against them. Councilman Pike at this point has said, okay, I knew what I knew at the time when I made that vote. I know more now. And he was quick to say, look, this is an ongoing lawsuit, so I can't get into great detail. But his emphasis is, I want the senior organization that has a certain let's say faction of seniors, right? And the seniors that have continued to come to the senior building with all the city-run organizations. He's like, we need harmony. We need all of them to be welcome. We need all of them to come back. Mayor Pierce on the podcast from Monday was saying Stan Ridgway should not be brought back into the fold. And that's not something that I want. This is a person, he was saying, that spread lies and really made a lot of trouble for the city. And we don't need to bring him back into the fold. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sums it up pretty well. I think it's also important to make a distinction that the senior center, they weren't evicted. They just had their lease ended.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No,
yeah,
it's okay. I'm not trying to it's just important to, like,
no, that's an important point.
Because they had, and that was really what they were voting on at the time, that Pike did vote for, which was, we're going to end this lease. And a big thing that was going on at the time, there were so many things, discussion of finances, but also there was a $10 million wrongful death claim filed that I think rightfully kind of freaked everybody out. You get a thing that says, I'm going to sue you for $10 million because someone died in a senior center transport van. I think that really kicked off all of this. But even before, and Pike was one of the people that voted and said,
we should end the lease.
Let's end the lease. I remember him saying, I think this is going to be good for everybody. Like, we're going to, he went along with it. He was also the liaison to the senior center at the time. And even though Helen Russell, the other council member, was really, really involved on going in and doing an audit and finances and criticizing some of the ways that the senior center has handled their money. So there's a lot that's happened here where Pike did vote for it. He also was on council when they agreed to sue them.
Right.
And now he's running for mayor and is saying, okay, I'm changing my mind. And so I think some voters are seeing this as, wow, are you going back because you're trying to pick up Ridgway's voters? But then I think there's the other perspective, which is other people are saying, well, you get more information and you change your mind.
Right. And
so this is another factor where it just depends on your perception of the issue and your perception of people and how they are. So we'll see, but that is a big difference. And something that happened was Mayor Pierce had a meeting with all the seniors after they decided to take over the senior center. And the meeting was intended to be, tell me what you want. What programs do you want at the new city-run Eagle Senior Center? The bulk of the conversation at that meeting was seniors shouting at Pearson, criticizing him for shutting things down. It was a very tense meeting, and I remember at the end of it, Pierce saying to the crowd, well, if you don't like it, if you don't like what happened, vote me out. And voters might do that.
Right. Yeah, there was that comment from the other day from Ruth Ann Patton, like, it might surprise you that I'm a senior. I was like, oh, she's got a sense of humor. That's good. But yeah, she referenced that exact statement. She's like, I'll see you at the ballot box. I don't know. That's why my de facto old person voice. I'm sorry, Ruth. I don't mean to. Like, because when I was going to Berkeley, I actually lived in a seminary. Believe it or not, the seminary was not all the way filled out. So the Archbishop rented out rooms to the rowing team. He and the rowing coach were good friends, and the bishop really liked me. We'd play chess, and I'd like drink tea with him and chat with him. And he was this like 80 something year old guy, huge man, because he had apparently rowed at Wisconsin like 60 years prior, and he had this white hair, and he'd always be like, Matt, you have to understand. And I'd serve at church with him. He'd take me because he really we'd talk philosophy and stuff. So he would take me, and I'd have to like put robes on, and like it was the Anglican church. It was very conservative. So they had the incense thing and like candles and stuff. I always felt bad. I'm like, I'm not even a member of this church. I just live in this house, and the bishop wanted me to drive him to the church today. But it was great. Like,
this is a total aside.
Yes.
But were you on the rowing team?
I was.
I was on the rowing team in college too.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University.
Look at you.
Well, I was a coxswain, so
there it is.
Which
you
makes
got
sense
the better end of the deal
because I'm 5'4".
Yeah, no, I rowed for Cal for 4 years.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was talk about a long haul, man. Like those were rough years, but I'm a better man for it, and you're probably a better woman for it. I would have liked to be steering the boat, though. I'll tell you that much. Anyway,
it was fun.
Yeah, man, what an experience. Okay, so that's the senior center, and again, like I can see again, you see both sides of the information and the whole thing. I don't live in Eagle. You don't live in Eagle. I do think that there needs to be harmony. However you find harmony, if it's in the manner that Councilman Pike wants to do it, or Mayor Pierce, like we need to have harmony. We need to have a place where all of the seniors of Eagle can come, right? Whether that's through whatever organization, but it would just be really unfortunate if this fracture became permanent and like some of them met at the church over here and then some met at the center and like some weren't welcome and some were, and that's just not necessary.
We'll see. I mean, really, like, I take a super neutral stance on this. Like, I don't really say, like, one way or the other, like, what the best solution is. Like, I've just tried to, like, share facts and what's going on. No,
sure.
And then
I'll go out on a limb and say I think there should be harmony in some way in the senior center. And again, not saying that Pike has the best strategy or Pierce has the best strategy, but it would be awesome for everyone. Like if I grow to be a senior here, which I would love to do in 30 years or 40 years, like I would love to know that there's like an awesome senior center where like all seniors are welcome. That's it.
No, and I totally makes sense. I just want to make it clear that I'm not like endorsing one way or the other.
Sure.
I think this issue, I mean, senior issues always activate voters because across the board, seniors vote more, especially municipal elections and other groups. And so this has become an activating issue, but it's not the only activating issue. I mean, we've seen Pierce take criticism on other topics.
Right.
And so it's kind of like we've got all of these different things that are playing into this election. It's not just one group mad about one thing.
Right.
There's tension and discussion about policy from everything from A to Z.
Right.
In this race.
Right. It's pretty wild. Okay. So that's the senior center. And again, want to beat this point dead. I think harmony should happen, right? However you want to do it, if it's Pike or Pierce, like the seniors just need to feel cared for in some way. Next issue, campaign funding. Okay. Now this one's kind of short and sweet. I am going to pop up an image here on the screen for everyone to see. Boom. There it is. Boom. Yeah. Okay. So we have Mayor Pierce. Now, Mayor Pierce on the Idaho Sunshine Report, there's a screenshot off that website, did raise $73,869, has spent $43,460. The big distinction in funding, well, there's that. And then, of course, Councilman Pike has only raised $32,504, and he spent $23,350. So big difference here with funding, right? Like Mayor Pierce is obviously far better at fundraising than Councilman Pike. Okay.
Yep.
But the big distinction that Councilman Pike touts is that he has elected to not take funding from developers or, contractors, things of that nature, whereas Mayor Pierce does, and he feels that those people are, individuals in the community and deserve representation from a donation standpoint as well.
Yeah, that's really the big distinction. And we saw, the home builder lobby has been really active in municipal elections for the last, multiple cycles now. The Building Contractors Association, some of these major home builders, even the PAC that was backing Pierce, the Building Industry Group of the Treasure Valley, and then now the Preserve Idaho PAC. Right. And so those groups, they're active. They give a lot of money because they have a vested interest in how municipal elections go, because they control zoning, they control development. And so this is just another sort of election that follows in that same theme of home builders who particularly build in more rural parts of Ada County getting very active in these elections.
Now, the PAC donations, like if I'm a PAC and I donate directly to, say, Councilman Pike, yep, then that gets reported here, right? But if I'm a PAC, I can go out and do a mailer or a text message chain as long as I indicate this was Matt's PAC that paid for this. Is that correct?
Yes. So the way PACs work is that they are not supposed to coordinate with candidates.
Right. And I wouldn't ask, Councilman Pike or Mayor Pierce. It's just I'm going to do this. I'm not even, they can't ask, they can't coordinate, they can't do anything. But if I was I'm going to send out this mailer, as long as I put paid for by, Matt Todd's PAC, then I get to do that.
Yeah, totally. And that's what we've seen in this race. So you often see two different kinds of messages. You see the candidates, they're going to have their message, their campaign, they're saying what they're going to say. And then there's this other level where the PACs are putting out their own campaign, their own messaging that might be different in tone, that might be that might be look completely different. Right. Than a candidate. In this case, during the race, Pierce was heavily backed up by Building Industry Group of Treasure Valley. They spent $13K in the last week for him. If I just looked at that.
Okay. What industry or what? Bleh, somebody just spent $13,000 in the last week in support of Pierce.
In the last week of the general election, yeah. The Building Industry Group of Treasure Valley. It's a PAC. It was set up by home builders like Trade Winds General Contracting. I think they were running that PAC and taking in donations. They got donations from builders. They got donations from firefighters because that was when they were active supporting Mike Masterson for mayor. They also got a lot of support from Harry Bettis, who is a big rancher up in Emmett, and they were running ads supporting Pierce. And then now they have changed, and now they have given their money to a new PAC, Preserve Idaho PAC, that is running more ads in support of Pierce. And that same sort of network goes back to 3 years ago, when they were supporting candidates that were they were running ads against candidates who didn't want Avimor. And so it all it's that nexus of home builders that have, certain interests. And so they were running these PAC ads. Then on the other hand, we've got Brad Pike. He's been attacked for having PAC support from this new PAC called Protect Eagle. And who's funding that PAC? The Conservation Voters for Idaho, which is a bipartisan group. They have heavily backed Lauren McLean. And they get they're linked to conservation groups. They have gotten money from DC. And then that PAC has also taken in donations from the Eagle Firefighter PAC, and then another developer, Tommy Alquist, who is kind of on the opposite end. He's a more urban developer, right? And so he's backing a different set of candidates than the home builder, group. And so it's these two sides struggling for power in these PAC races, and then the candidates, they don't have any say.
Yeah, they can't do anything. What I find really interesting is the mailers that are going out, because I keep getting pictures of these mailers going out.
Right.
And even in the city council meeting recently, there was a comment near the end from Mark Butler, who used to be on the Eagle City Council. He actually came in and did an interview recently. He brought me that beautiful picture. Really cool guy. And he got up and he's like, Brad, like, I don't understand the things you've been doing. This is what he was saying. He's like, I don't understand the things you've been doing. Like, you've been doing some like, I got this, I can't remember if it was an email or a mail or a text message or something. And he was really taken back by it. He's like, this doesn't seem like you. And Brad's like, yeah, because it wasn't me. It's a PAC. And the PAC, the manipulation of PACs seems really interesting to me, because you could turn off voters for Brad by being super positive for Brad, right? For instance, there was one mailer that went out recently. There was like, saying how Brad is running for all of these great things like increased bike lanes and increased, buses, and wants more equity in the community. And like, it's spun as this positive thing. It was all fake. It was paid for by a PAC, and it appeared to be something supporting him. And then Brad takes the fall for it, because they essentially frame him for wanting these things that people just really are not talking. Like, nobody's sitting around here. I haven't heard anybody sitting around here talking about like bike lanes and like more equity in the Eagle community. And I don't know, for people that aren't from California, if you mention equity to a Californian, like, I guarantee the hairs on the back of their neck, like, oh my God. Like, they have equity liaisons at school, which are essentially like, we need a quality of outcome. Like, how are we going to get a quality of outcome? And that's how they create equity liaisons. They don't want a quality of opportunity. They want literally everybody from every demographic, like, finishing at the same line. And it's, that's a different thing. But the point is, it's interesting to me how people are using these things to either be really vicious and like vicious on, say, in this case with Mr. Butler, vicious on Brad's behalf. And Brad's like, that's not me. I'm not doing this stuff. So if you happen to be a voter who's very turned off by this vicious messaging, you'd be like, oh, Mr. Pike, like, this is inappropriate. Or you're somebody who is turned off by like this positive bleeding heart messaging of like, we need equity in Eagle. You're like, oh, no. I'm all about meritocracy. Give everybody a shot. There's going to be no equity in that ever, because we all have members of our family that either work harder or not as hard, and that's within the same family. Like, we're not ever going to have equity throughout a community like that. So anyway, it's very interesting how that's like, you get it both ways with that messaging. It's really goofy, and it's very hard, I think, for people to really unpack it.
Well, and
did you see what I did there? Unpack it. Thank you.
That was good. That
Thank
was
you.
good.
I try.
No, yeah, I mean, well, PACs are interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up, because so the building industry group of the Treasure Valley, they also used to go by the name Conservative Citizens for Thoughtful Growth. They have been well known and notorious for making these pretty negative attack ads. And I'm saying they're negative not because I personally don't like them, but because of the language they're using. Associating, I think, like, it coined former Democratic Ada County Commissioner Diana Lacciando, Lockdown Lacciando, because she supported COVID-19 restrictions. Criticizing, calling Lauren McLean, saying, oh, she's affordable housing everywhere, turning it into Portland, attracting addicts, and all of this, like, kind of negative language. And, some people looked at that language and said, heck yeah, I like this. I don't like Lauren McLean. I like this message. A lot of other people were in the comments over the multiple municipal cycles going, are you doing attack ads? Well, I don't like that.
Right.
And actually, we had this happen where that group, Building Industry Group of Treasure Valley, they go by Big TV, but that's such a weird name, in my opinion. They ran an ad that was anti-LGBTQ messaging and was really, really negative on that, with Lauren McLean and associating her with negative things about that. And Mike Masterson came out and disavowed the ad. And he said, this is not me. Don't want to be the anti-gay guy. Like, this is not the campaign I want to run. And they took down the PAC. The PAC took down the ad, because it was such strong messaging. And he said, I don't want to be associated with this.
Right.
And so that plays out too, where sometimes these ads, you're right, they can be counterintuitive or they can be confusing.
Right.
Lauren McLean got hit because there was a PAC heavily supported by conservation voters for Idaho called Boise Fact Check that was running all of these ads that was kind of like they were kind of trying to do like quasi journalism fact checking, and some of the claims were misleading. We did a lot of reporting on it over at Boise Dev. People were looking at those ads going, what the heck is this? I'm not a fan. Other people liked him, and so those PACs can affect the outcome of the race, but in a way that's out of reach from the candidate.
Right. Right. Out of reach. And that's the big thing. So you're guilty by association, even though you have no control over it. There's a lot of political action in the town I came from. It's very similar to Eagle, upper end income, more expensive houses, nice area, very good schools, called Danville. And in 22, they had people going around like randomly. Nobody knew who did it, but they were sandwich bags, like snack bags with a black and white leaflet in it with like a little rock. They just throw them in your driveway, right? So people were like driving around randomly throwing these. And it was all about the Jewish agenda that Biden had and like join the conservatives to like stop the Jewish agenda. And people were aghast because like Danville's very reasonable. They're not anti-Semitic at all, right? And the political play, I actually spoke with one of the city councilmen about this. And he said, this is actually something that's happening in a lot of places all over California. They're going to places with money and influence and aligning conservatism with like anti-Semitism, LGBTQ, like all of these crazy, like it's so black and white. It's like, oh, this is literally meant to just disgust you. And what very unfortunately happened in Danville is that people just immediately started associating conservatism with anti-Semitism because they got these mailers. So it's like, guys, these are crazy people. Like there's a reason that this was thrown in your driveway in the dead of night and it has no like actual place to like go talk to someone. Like there's no accountability. It's not something that people are proud of. They're like, no, this is how I really feel. Like come change my mind at like a little table or something. These are cowardly political actors that are just throwing this stuff trying to get you upset. And it's weird. Anyway.
Politics is weird.
God bless you. That's
send tweet.
Send tweet. God bless it. Okay, let's move on. So, campaign funding, PACs, right? That, as you're saying, the candidates don't have control over or aren't associated with it all. Law enforcement. This was like one of the big fractures between Councilman Pike and Mayor Pierce.
Right.
Councilman Pike feels that you need to be proactive with law enforcement. You need to get closer to the 1 per 1,000. He knows it's not going to happen overnight, but he feels that you need to push towards that ratio and really keep this area as safe as possible. And additionally, with the addition of Avimor, he feels we're like doubly underserved. Not doubly, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but really wants to try to work up the number of officers in the Eagle Police Department because, again, he's worried that we're not protecting ourselves appropriately. Mayor Pierce feels that we are serving our residents at the appropriate level per the service calls. And he's like, listen, we don't have that much crime. So no, we don't need a ton more officers. We have the right officers to address the amount of crime that we're experiencing. And if that crime were to increase, we'd increase our officers, but like, we're not going to just, preemptively strike and increase this. Whereas again, Councilman Pike feels you need to be proactive.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of what's going on. And Pierce has also, but he's really butted heads with the Eagle police chief.
Oh my gosh. Butting heads is saying it lightly.
Yeah, because the Eagle police chief sent a letter. He was really frustrated leading up into the contract negotiations that they weren't going to get more officers. And he sent this email, being very, very critical of the mayor. And also there was this tension because Mayor Pierce thinks that, he believes that the county should have more responsibility of policing state highways that go through Eagle. There's many of them, and he was feeling, we're not getting our money's worth, essentially. And then Ada County and the Eagle police chief said, no, we disagree. Sheriff Matt Clifford said, I disagree. I think if it's in city boundaries, Eagle Police Department has to police it. And so there's been this tension, and it really boiled over leading up to the general election. There were two meetings in a row. I think I mentioned this earlier, where Pierce and Pike really got into it. in a public meeting over the process of this contract negotiation, how much money should be going to the police. Pike felt like there wasn't enough information about the negotiation process, and Pierce was very frustrated with them and said, no, this is how it works. Every year we're negotiating this right up until the end, and it's after the budget process. We're negotiating how this is going to work. And I think it just speaks to they're not communicating well.
Right.
And that plays out in this race where they're so they just keep talking past each other, especially on this issue. And Pike really wants, if he's elected, when I talked to him, he said, yeah, I want to take other parts of the general fund and I want to put it towards policing. But you always got to remember the pizza is only so big of that budget. And so that is going to involve, okay, if we're going to spend more money on police, what are we going to cut? And Pierce has done, I mean, he has invested in police, but he's also put a lot of money in towards like park projects and buying the Orville Jackson house, looking at building the gun range up in the foothills that people have really strong opinions about one way or the other. And so Pike, if he comes in, he might try to say, I don't want to build the gun range right now. Let's hire more police. Or, you know, I think we should put off renovating the Orville Jackson house to be a community center or whatever they, you know, end up wanting to do with it, so we can fund more police. And so and if the council goes along with that, that's going to be really the $1 million question.
So I actually asked Pike about this on Sunday, and I was like, how are you going to fund this? And he said, we'll take it out of the general fund. I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Like, what are we cutting? And it again, just denoting my ignorance with some issues. He's like, all right, so we have capital projects, right? He's like, it's not that you have to let go of one capital project in order to do this, but you can, instead of funding that thing like 100% right out of the blocks, you do like 95%. And you do a bunch of things where you like fund them 95. Let's say $1 million is going to it. It's like, all right, no. You get 950,000 and you get 950,000, but like that extra 50, we do this to enough projects where they're still moving ahead. They're just not quite funded the exact same way we thought. And we put that other money towards police service. So again, it's not a zero sum game,
right?
Which is, again, my ignorance. I should have known that, but he really spelled it out. He's like, no. You just don't completely fund the way you anticipated this other thing. It's not that it's not moving forward. It's not that it's not happening. It will just take, instead of 3 years, it'll take 3 years and 4 months or something like that. It's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So that kind of made sense to me with how he was planning on funding it. But again, the council would have to go along with that.
Yeah, and it also like, but we always have this tension in local government where no one wants to pay taxes. I get it. I don't love paying taxes either, right?
You don't? I love writing that check. It's so great.
So fun.
So fun.
You know, okay, but like no one wants to pay taxes, but they also want the best park right next to their house. They also want the police to come in 2 seconds. They also want all of these things. And so we always have this, like local government is always in this position, and it happens in Boise too. It happens in Meridian. It happens all these cities of like the push and pull between what people say they want on paper and then what they actually want.
Right.
And so I think like if Pike tries to implement this plan, like, okay, we're going to take money out of the general fund. We're going to fund, you know, we're going to use this. We're going to slow down some construction and we're going to fund more police officers. People would be like, great. Guarantee you at the next city council meeting, we'd have people saying, what do you mean you're delaying the shooting range by a year?
Right. No matter what.
And so I think that's always going to be with us, right?
Sure. And that makes sense. That actually kind of brings us to our next thing. Well, actually, shoot. That's the following one. We were going to hit vision of the future after this.
Yeah.
But okay. We actually talked about Avimor already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we can dish that. So the vision of the future, that's the next one. They both have similar visions for the future of similar, not identical,
right?
But like they're both talking about slowing down growth. As we've acknowledged, you can't stop people from building. You can help that you have zoning, you have different, comprehensive plan, you have different styles of building and, okaying certain businesses. Mayor Pierce was very clear on how, for instance, the Albertsons is the only one that was like built that way. And then, Albertsons loved it and they, started doing that construction style, things like that. But neither one of them want like high rises. Neither one of them want crazy 5-story apartment buildings. There is the case that Councilman Pike did vote for the height exemption for the project last year next to Rembrandt's. That is absolutely true. And he felt that area needs to develop more. We need more. His concern, it appears, is that we need more of a commercial base and not be such a fee-based revenue stream with, like building fees and whatnot. So
right.
It's my understanding that was a piece of it. But again, he did vote for that. There's no disputing it. But again, neither of them want to destroy the way Eagle is. Agreed?
Yeah, I think they're both looking at a similar sort of vision of a suburban, semi-rural community that has conservative values.
I love how you have all this vocabulary perfect. You're like the suburban, semi-rural, conservative value. Like, I'm like, you just said in like 2 seconds what I was trying to get out.
Oh, I mean,
it's good.
I love words. Words are fun.
Words are fun.
Yeah. So like, I think they're both like grounded in that vision, but definitely, I'm glad you brought up the economic development issue, because that is another major cleave point where Brad Pike sort of sees economic development and bringing in more businesses as a way to keep those values,
right?
And say, okay, well, if people are working here and they have jobs, then they will not be traveling outside of Eagle as much. We can build a stronger community. We can have more customers at these downtown businesses. And Pierce is sort of just like, I can't remember what he told me, but I talked to him about it. And he's like, I think we shouldn't be attracting those large companies to come here. We shouldn't be using our resources to try to lure people in that same way. I think they, but at the same time, Pierce supported, at his State of the City, he was out there supporting the new money metals exchange coming to Eagle and, some of these businesses. So I think they both are pro-business, but in like a little bit of a different way.
Brad Pike definitely wanted the first In-N-Out, and Jason Pierce definitely wanted the fourth. It broke my heart.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you also have to remember, and I talked to Pike about this when I interviewed him, it's the same thing with businesses as it is with development. If I want to build, Margaret's Pizza Store in Eagle, and I like meet all of Eagle's requirements and do what they want me to do, you can't deny Margaret's Pizza Store coming to Eagle. And just the same way you can't deny growth.
Right.
And so it's important to understand that, like, just because Pierce was not out there maybe like meeting with companies and meeting with In-N-Out and like or these other, and I don't know if he met with In-N-Out. I'm not privy to those conversations.
Sure.
But just because like Pierce has said, hey, I don't want to be out there like attracting these companies in the same way that Pike says we should or Eagle should, doesn't mean that Pierce can just say no to business where he's anti-business.
Right.
I don't think that's kind of, it seems like splitting hairs, but it's important. Mayor isn't God. They can't just stand there and say no.
Right. And just because you're not out campaigning for more businesses doesn't mean you don't want more businesses to come in. It just means that you only have so much time, right? And you have your priorities and you have the things you're going after. So yeah, just because somebody, it's the old adage with, if you're not out fighting against racism, then you're a racist. It's like, that's not true. Like, maybe I have kids and a wife and like, I can't go and picket every weekend. That doesn't mean I'm racist. It just means I don't have time for this particular pursuit. So again, to your point, just because he's not out, trying to attract businesses doesn't mean he doesn't want business to come here. It just means that perhaps it's a higher, a bigger priority for Pike, and he feels that we should be actively going after it.
Yeah, and it's just a different philosophy of how to structure the economic development department. I mean, Pike has said, hey, I want to hire an economic development director.
Right.
And, and have that person like take a more active role. And it's just a different approach.
Right. We've hit all of our things.
I think we have. Do
you have anything you want to point out that we didn't hit?
vote in your local elections, because your vote, especially in a runoff, your vote will matter more on Tuesday than any vote in any statewide or national election ever will. And that's why I love my job so much. And I love local journalism so much, because, like, truly, if you're listening to this podcast and you got all the way to the end,
You got all the way to the
you're
end.
a real nerd and I love you. But, like, this matters, and you should. And I really want to encourage people to vote. Vote for whoever you want. It's not up to
Just
me to tell you.
participate.
But participate. And because you see these elections, they can be decided by very few votes. We all saw how close the Eagle mayoral race was at the end of, on November 7th. Just go vote.
Go vote.
Go vote.
God bless it. Margaret, thank you for coming. This has been such a damn treat. Like, I'm glad I finally got to meet you. I'm so glad we were able to put this together. I'm really happy with what we talked about today, which is awesome. And I hope people do go vote. I hope we did a good job of presenting the best information for people, because that's, at the end of the day, like, we got to cut through the haze. Like, however we're doing it, be it on a podcast or articles or whatever it is, like, we got to get good information out there so people can make whatever decision they want. Just be cooking with good ingredients. Cook whatever you want. I don't care. Just, like, have the good stuff. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you for having me. And if you want to read more, just go to boisedev.com. I've got all kinds of Eagle stuff, and I will continue covering the city even after the election's over.
Do you have a specific handle for your articles? Do you have, like, an Instagram where people can find you? Or
I'm really active on Twitter, or X. It's X now. It's ML Carmel, Carmel. I'm on there. That's a place where I share all my stories.
Great.
I do live tweeting of some local government meetings and events. So that's probably the best place to find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for coming in. Thank you for what you do for the journalistic area and the Boise and Treasure Valley area as well.
Thanks.
This podcast is brought to you by Legacy Life Memories, the premier video autobiographical production company for you and your aging loved ones. Legacy Life Memories helps preserve memories of a lifetime in high-quality video that can be shared with every generation to come. Visit LegacyLifeMemories.com and find out how they can help your family today.